Marin Fire History proudly presents Families in Fire, the story of the generations of fire service personnel in Marin County.
Good morning, this is retired Fire Chief Paul Smith. Welcome everyone today to the Marin Fire History, and I have the pleasure today of introducing my sometimes co-host, Chief Bill Lellis, and his son, Mike Lellis, and we're going to do a segment on Families in Fire today. We're happy to be at Larkspur Station 15, the downtown station, and we appreciate the courtesy of the Central Marin Fire Department in them providing the facility today. Thank you, and continue watching Marin Fire History. We hope you enjoy this segment. Well, this morning we're at Larkspur Station 15, and retired Fire Chief Bill Lellis. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Paul.
And retired Fire Captain Mike Lellis.
Morning, Paul.
How are you, dude?
I'm fantastic.
Good. Well, we appreciate you meeting up with us here today, and we'd like to get to know you better and how in this segment of Families in Fire. And Bill, why don't you tell us briefly about how you got started in the fire service here in Larkspur?
Real quick, I just gotten discharged from the Air Force after serving 4 years, and was going to the College of Marin on the GI Bill, and a classmate, his father was a volunteer here, Frankie Vansco, and she told me about a sleeper program here at Larkspur. So I came down and was interviewed by then Fire Chief John Raggio, and he offered me a position as a sleeper, and the place was pretty full at the time I was sleeping, so I got to sleep on a GI cot in the kitchen. But I took it on a heartbeat, and never wanted to be a fireman, was never my intention. My intention was to be a history teacher, and met my wife, got married, and 35 years later, we're here talking, and with my son, who's a fireman also. So that's my quick story.
Well, thank you, Bill. Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your introduction to the fire service?
Okay, well, grew up here a lot as a little kid, coming here because of him, bringing dinners with my mom, the foil covered plate to bring him dinner, 4th of July's, fireworks at Chief Archer's house, softball games, all that kind of stuff. Just as a kid, it was a huge family environment here as a child with all the firefighters and volunteers. Had Christmas Santa present giveaways right here every year. It was a good time.
Good.
So
good. And now did you start here as Larkspur when you became 18 as a volunteer, or how did you get involved in the fire service?
No, honestly, I never thought about doing it. That's what Dad did, so I didn't think I would ever do that. Didn't know what I would do. I've had 100 different jobs: delivery, pizza delivery, waiter, bartender, you name it. I've done all kinds of jobs. It wasn't until one day, I was about 22, 23, job I was at, it didn't work out so much anymore, so I quit, came home, and said, what do I got to do to be a firefighter? And came up here and I became a volunteer, entered the Firefighter 1 Academy, and the ball was rolling. Became a seasonal firefighter from Marin County that same summer. So that was 1991 is when it all started for me. But what first got me interested at even thinking about it potentially is he was teaching classes for the junior college, and it was a fire management class.
Okay.
And it was being taught at the old station too, in the app day. And I was probably a year or so maybe out of high school, going to the JC, College of Marin, and he needed students to make the class go, otherwise it was going to get canceled. So I went and took this class. It was fire management, doing the budget and all these different things, but the environment for me made me feel comfortable. That was the guys were great. At a fire station, it wasn't your typical classroom setting, so it kind of gave me a little glimpse of what could potentially be. But it wasn't for a few years later that I actually started pursuing the career.
You know, I find that interesting that you jumped into a College of Marin fire management class, or fire science class on fire management, as one of your first classes.
Yeah, that was my very first fire science class.
Because a lot of the students back at the time, Bill, we took, codes and ordinances, or we took mounted apparatus, something more, maybe a little more hands-on.
Right, yeah. But I will say, when he started testing, he tested in the western United States, basically.
Yeah.
He went to any place and every place, took Las Vegas, Sparks, Long Beach, you name it, he went and tested. And,
Yeah, he used to have a company, it was called Perfect Firefighter Candidate. You subscribe to it, you get this little yellow card in the mail with a list of departments that are testing. So it was like exciting to go to the mailbox and see the new card. Because I tested solid for 5 years. The competition was crazy back then. Waiting overnight for be the first 50 applicants to get accepted, things like that. So I was as far as Everett, Washington, Seattle, all the way to San Diego, Reno, Sparks, and all points in between. Merced, Modesto, I think Eugene, Oregon as well was another one up there, but all up and down for 5 years. And then my first full-time job was with Marin County Fire Department, where I was a seasonal.
You were started that's your first paid job?
Yes.
First paid gig?
Yes.
And how many seasons were you at Marin?
I did 5 seasons as a seasonal, and in the end of summer, spring of that last year, I was hired full-time as what they call the FSA, Fire Services Assistant. Essentially, it was a non-safety position. My badge said EMT, and I drove the rescue unit out of Woodacre, and I did that for 6 months.
Okay.
And then I was hired by the Sausalito Fire Department as a full-time firefighter, engineer, driver, and I was there for 5 years. And then, we got to step back, going to Larkspur. So I became a volunteer here, was my first step. But I also was a vacation relief firefighter for a couple of years here.
Oh, right.
Me and Tom Timmer, whose picture is still up on the board, were the same time. So we probably got 25 shifts a year, something like that each, to fill in as firefighters. So that was probably my first introduction to really working shift firefighter work.
And Tom stayed here?
Yeah, Tom is still here as far as I know.
Yep, Tom stayed here at Larkspur, and you moved on to Marin County Fire?
Yep.
Then you went to Sausalito Fire?
Yep.
And then what happened after Sausalito, Mike?
Well, 5 years in Sausalito, loved the place, loved the department, loved the city, but I did not feel fulfilled as a firefighter. The city of Santa Rosa Fire Department was hiring laterals, so all I had to do was turn in an application. There was no agility test or written exam or anything like that, and I was living in Santa Rosa. So to me, it was kind of a no-brainer just to at least apply, and I ended up getting it, and spent the last almost 20 years of my life there, and I just retired just over 2 years ago.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Michael, we talked briefly about you coming down here to Larkspur as a kid. Did your father, did he have any influence on your fire service career at all, or was that just Bill shaking his head no?
No, I mean, probably just indirectly.
Okay.
Just for being exposed to it as a kid.
Yep.
I always enjoyed the environment. All the people here were always very welcoming to me as a kid and as I grew up. I was taking a photography class at high school, and one of the bathrooms here was a dark room that he converted to develop film back when you actually had to develop film.
Right.
So I would come here as part of that class to develop some pictures from time to time. So even then, the guys that I knew as a kid still knew me. It was just as I grew up.
Sure.
But like I said, it wasn't until that first class that kind of just showed me what the environment was, that camaraderie of the guys. I wasn't a huge student, I barely graduated high school. It just wasn't my thing. So, but I went to the JC. After 8 years, I finally got my AS degree in fire science. Got an A in every single fire science class.
Well, you both of you have had really interesting careers and really good careers. But let's take a step and talk a little bit about the fire service when in the late 50s and the 1960s, when you were running around on the back of a fire engine. We used to call you tailboard firefighters. I don't think the firefighters coming out of the academy now, I don't even know if that's even a term,
That's a concept they could never conceive of.
Right.
Yeah.
And then maybe we can talk with the both of you about an evolution of how the fire service has changed from the 1960s and 70s. And when did you start, Michael? 91?
91, yeah.
91. So we have the 50s until 1950s until last year.
Yeah, 2020, December of 2020.
That's a heck of a fire service legacy.
When I first became a sleeper, On Saturday at noon, the paid men, there were 3 paid men, Chief Aggio, Assistant Chief George Bartram, and firefighter Claire Harder. On Saturday at noon, they left. The fire defenses for the city of Loxton were turned over to 19, 18-year-old kids, volunteers, sleeper volunteers, and we were in charge of the city's fire department from Saturday noon till Monday 8 o'clock. And you're the only person on duty, one person on duty. Even when I became a paid man at 60, I was just one guy with a squad. The squad you see behind me on the website, that squad is it's my favorite piece of apparatus.
That's the GMC, Bill?
It's at the GMC that was given to the car show. So I mean, the concept, looking back, even myself, although I went through it and did it, it was just, that's how it was. There was no thought of another guy or anything. It was one guy, that's all I could afford. You had a squad, 200 gallons of water, by yourself, no communications on the radios, everybody had their own 911 call. Every city had its own 911. Call wasn't called 911, but it was a phone number.
The 7-digit number.
Yeah,
huh?
7-digit number that
Yeah.
everyone called, and you just responded. We did very little first aid, It was all private ambulances. And slowly that came into the business with the advanced first aid courses. And then this famous EMT course, emergency medical technician, came into the being, and we introduced EMT to we couldn't get it into the fire science program. We had to go through the nursing program because of the part of the responsibilities at those days to graduate with an EMT certification. You had to spend so many hours in the emergency room, and that's how the nursing would handle that. We didn't have the facilities to handle that, so it was through the nursing that EMT classes came by. And then we eventually, as the Bay Area started to grow in the 60s, and population when I was here was 5,000 people, no Bon Air Road, no Bon Air Bridge. We had to respond to Greenbrae by going right past Enfield Fire Station. No way to tell them we were responding, no one had radios to talk to each other. And then slowly we added 2 guys, and then we finally opened the Greenbrae Station and put 1 guy out there. I was assigned out there by myself with the same squad. I ran out there for 2 or 3 years by myself. And we slowly picked up as the community grew, topped out at about 12,000. And now when I was here, we only had 5 men. 3 guys at this station and 2 at Station 1. And then when I became fire chief and looked at the statistics and mutual aid calls, Station 2, Greenbrae Station, was the assigned mutual aid. So it was, and the runs were coming out of that station. So I made the transfer of putting the 3 guys at Station 2 and 2 guys here at Station 1 because Corte Madera is so close and very aggressive to help us out. So and it worked out quite well. And then eventually, I think Scott Schertz, Chief Schertz, got the 3rd guy. So I think it's currently running 3 and 3. So it's been quite a change from 1 guy on duty, no breathing apparatus to speak of, no first aid calls other than to yourself. And now it's all EMT, then we went paramedic, and then when Michael got into the game in Sausalito, then when he went to Santa Rosa, the runs, really were quite consuming of the guys at the time. So that's pretty much how it went.
And where are we at today? You mentioned you were the last 19 or 20 years in Santa Rosa. Talk a little bit about that, Michael.
Well, for me, I was looking forward to being busy. So, no knock on Sausalito, but there hadn't been a structure fire in the city of Sausalito in the last 2 years that I worked there. There'd be other fires in the, mutual aid, Mill Valley, things like that. But I was just at a point where I wanted more out of my career. I didn't want to spend another 20 plus years just doing that. So like I said, Santa Rosa opportunity came up, and I knew it was just a bigger city, more going on, more potential opportunities for running calls and being what you train for. So I got hired up there, and it was everything I wanted. I remember some of my first few shifts up there, we'd have 2 structure fires in one shift, or a structure fire, a wildland fire, and a vehicle fire, all in one shift. So stuff I had never, like I said, no structure fires in 2 years to very often running fire calls, and that's what I wanted to do.
Now, were you on the engine company as a firefighter? Is that when you lateraled up there?
Yes, started off as just a firefighter. They weren't even EMTs, they were just becoming EMTs when I got there.
And you had already had a lot of ambulance experience.
Because I was on the private ambulance, United Ambulance, for about a year or two during that initial couple stage, 1992.
Okay.
So, yeah, and then Sausalito Ambulance, obviously.
So you worked your way up to engine and truck company, or what did you eventually?
Well, as a firefighter, they have 2 truck companies, so I was able to get assigned to one of the truck companies. So I spent a couple years as a firefighter on the truck, and then I promoted to engineer, which initially was an engine company engineer, but then not promoted, but just based on seniority and bids and things, I ended up on the truck again for a couple years as an engineer, and then eventually promoted to captain. And same thing, went to an engine company for a little while as a captain, and then I went to the truck company for a couple years as captain. And then back to an engine company. I got bumped off because of seniority, so I went back to an engine company, which was great. I like them both. They're just very different beings, essentially, but both fun. And then as my career started to wind down a little bit, maybe wanted to slow it down a little bit, so just went back to an engine company and retired out of the Oakmont station on an engine 7.
Nice. Now let's talk a little bit, we'll go back to your dad here a little bit. Bill, all is using the fire service that you served here in Larkspur. What would you say might be one of the career highlights, one of the things that stand out to you as something positive that you were able to accomplish?
That's a good question. I think we instituted when we first got 2 captains, Craig Schertz was one captain, I was another captain when we promoted. He took fire prevention and I took training. And the training is what I developed the concept of the run book. What we now call the run book. That came out of here.
You didn't have them before, is that what you're saying?
Nobody had a run book. No one had a run book. I had a couple firemen who were good with the pencil and paper and the assessor's parcel maps. Gary Dignan, former fire chief at Forestville, worked for us, and a gentleman by the name of John Hellman, who transferred to San Francisco. And they basically, the 3 of us put together the first run book in the county, I think the first run book in the state, because we had people coming from all over to see our run book. And it was just a concept, but I learned it from experience, being the only guy on duty by yourself. You needed all the aids you could get before you left the station, because there was no communications that helped or talk to anybody. And you had to know the apartment complex, and was probably the biggest challenge. The complexes over there, 3-4-story buildings, apartments, where they were, what stairwell to take, and you're by yourself carrying a 78-pound necessitator. You want to be sure you didn't have to go an extra flight of stairs. So those are the kinds of the calls that we said that there's got to be a better system. So I started making my own run book for myself, and then we hired some more guys, and Gary and John volunteered to help out, and next thing you know, we had our first run book. And we dug in Doug's museum. We still have a copy of one of the original run books.
That's cool. That is so cool.
Yeah.
That's we talk all the time on Red Fires about technology.
Yeah.
And that's a piece of technology, pencil and paper, really.
Yeah, there was.
But you had nothing. You didn't have a run book.
No, I assume Thomas Brothers was out and about.
And how about gas station maps? Do you have copies of those?
No gas station maps. I
Maps.
think because they couldn't help us with the apartment complexes.
Sure.
They would tell us what roads to get to, but you had to know all the roads. The one thing you had to know, like all firemen take it for granted, but in those days, to pass your probation, you had to know where every hydrant in the city was.
Right.
And every street. And we just banged that home during the probationary training that we were developing. As we were starting to hire guys, we needed a training manual. So I developed a training manual. We had maybe a 3-week transfer from being hired before you went on shift. And we just banged street identification and hydrant location. You had to know those things or you couldn't pass. And we just banged it home. And to this day, this guy's all retired. I always look back on it. They say it was one of the best things they ever did. Because once they got on duty, they weren't afraid of where the hell am I going. You know,
Right.
where's the closest hydrant?
Right.
It was all in a piece of, in a book.
Right.
Yeah, so it worked out quite. So when you asked the question, I never thought about, I guess I would say the run book.
Yeah,
The
cool.
development of the run book.
And we'll go over to Michael, and you know, you had a long career too. Sounds like 30 years in the fire service
Just
plus.
about, yeah.
About 30 years plus.
25 in PERS.
Yeah, and you know, you were a volunteer here, and then seasonal at County Fire. So yeah, you well over 30 years all in all. What do you think? One of your highlights? One of the memorable highlight that you had as a firefighter?
You know, I was trying to think about that when you sent it to us earlier. It's really hard to pinpoint one specific thing or one specific call. I mean, you can talk about a code save or something like that gives you a good sense of accomplishment. But I think just the overall, the longevity of it all and being committed to it, you know, probably not as much as he is, but in my way. Training people, once I get trained well, I had some great people teach me along the way. And being able to share that and see them promote and succeed, you know, that's kind of fun. That's one thing I never forget that I found myself passing on, you know, the little sayings you hear as you're younger. Way back in the day, it says, you didn't start the fire, you didn't cause the emergency, so stay calm.
Yep.
He used to always say is when he was in IC, don't let go of the door. Stand there and just don't get too caught up and start spinning out of control, because some people do.
And a final question for you first, and I think, Bill, I'll start with you. If you were 20-something again, would you choose a fire service career? Looking back, would you do it all over again?
Oh, absolutely, there's no doubt. The only thing I've always said since I retired, with today I'd get more paperwork, I get more initials after my name besides retired. I would think that's, you can't stop learning. This job requires constant alertness, what's going down, what's going on. I mean, just look what's going on now in 2023, what it's all about, the society, the unsatisfaction with what's going on in the society and stuff like that. That comes to the firehouse eventually. I mean, you know, they're gonna respond into those situations, so. I had it kind of easy compared to what the stuff he had to run into. And just one quick sidelight, as I was telling you earlier, I would never say this when he was working, but as a parent, when your son's in the emergency business, and you hear of a call in Santa Rosa or something going on, like the day that the town almost burnt down, the first question his mom and I would ask each other, is Michael working today? And if Michael was working today, we'd all of a sudden, okay, and he worked in a hot station. He was like first into a lot of calls on one side of the freeway. And every time you go out as a parent, not as a fire chief, but as a parent, you say, is Michael working? Is he gonna be safe? And a couple other quick side notes, years ago when you had turnouts in my bedroom, when he was a little guy, he'd play with his Hot Wheels, and every once in a while, without telling me, he'd park one of the cars in one of my boots. And I can remember distinctly jumping up on the Bank of America explosion, when they bombed it, jumping up and jumping my turnouts and finding a Hot Wheel in between my toes. It hurt like hell, but that's what a 5-6-year-old kid does.
Yeah.
He does things like that.
Yeah.
So, but that's from a parent's point of view, not from a fire chief's point of view, a
Right.
parent's point of view. And we would never tell him that when he was in the business, never, ever.
Right. You don't want him to worry about you worrying, right?
No, he has his own family to worry about, and they worried about, you know, so anyway, that's.
Michael, what do you think? Would you start over again?
I would absolutely do it again. My big regret was waiting too long to get into it, trying to, you know, find my path, which I eventually did. I remember Roger Benz. He was the son of Ranger Benz, captain at Larkspur way back. So we grew up together. He was a year older than me, I believe. He was a volunteer in high school, 16, and when I became 16, he said, when are you going to become a volunteer? And at the time, like, nah, I don't want to do that. And looking back on it, I wish I had, because just get in earlier, do more. So,
But everybody finds their way.
yeah.
That's what I tell my kids.
Yeah.
You know, you have to find your own path.
Yeah.
And Michael, I'm glad you said that, because when you found your path, you were all in.
It was like, phew, here we go.
Yeah.
Okay, Paul, I want to thank you and Dan for taking the time to do this film with my son and myself. I can't tell you as a parent how proud I am as this young man sitting next to me. He did it all on his own, and I learned some new stuff that I didn't know about him. And again, it was my pleasure to sit here and talk to him today. And I look forward to the next Friends, Family, and Fire. Again, we thank you, Michael and I thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Thanks very, very much, and have a good day.